Daniel Carter was not the kind of man who ordered strange things from deep space traders. He fixed engines on Orion Outpost 7 and lived a quiet life among pipes machines and tired workers who only cared about surviving another cold cycle in space. That was why the metal crate outside his room made no sense. It stood taller than him and wider than his bunk door, with black alloy walls and red warning marks written in 5 alien languages. The station delivery bot floated beside it and repeated the same message in a calm voice. Delivery confirmed, living companion package assigned to Daniel Carter. Thank you for choosing Zinthari Luxury Exotic Pets. Daniel stared at the machine. He rubbed his eyes once, then looked again. Nothing changed. He stepped closer and checked the label with his hand screen. His name was there. His room number was there. The trade seal was real, but he had never bought any pet. He lived alone in a metal box above reactor level and spent most of his time fixing ship cores for people who did not even remember his face. He could barely keep a plant alive. Around him, workers began to slow down and stare. One laughed and asked if Daniel had finally become rich. Another said maybe it was a mating gift from some alien queen. Daniel ignored them and crouched near the crate. There were scratch marks on one side, not from shipping tools, from the inside. His smile faded. He pressed the service icon, and a panel slid open. Inside was a simple note: requested biological companion, tamed and conditioned. Safe for domestic handling. Do not expose to direct sunlight during first awakening. Nutrition required within 2 standard hours of opening. Daniel read it twice. Something cold moved through his chest. Safe for domestic handling. The words felt wrong. He looked at the crate again, and now it did not look like a pet box. It looked like a prison. He should have called station security. He should have sent it back unopened. But curiosity is stronger than good sense in many humans, and Daniel was very human. He asked the bot for override access, and the bot gave it without question. The heavy locks clicked one by one. A thin line opened down the center of the crate. Cold mist spilled out and rolled over the floor like breath from a sleeping beast. The crowd behind him stepped back. Daniel pulled harder. The doors opened. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Inside the crate was not a beast and not a pet. It was a young woman. She was curled tightly in the corner with chains around her wrists and ankles. The one chain had already snapped. Her skin was pale with a soft silver shade under the station lights. Dark hair covered part of her face, and 2 small folded wings trembled against her back like broken shadows. Her clothes were torn and thin, and her hands shook, as if even the air around her hurt. Then she opened her eyes. The whole hallway went silent. They were red, not bright, machine red, but deep, living red, like dying stars hidden behind tears. One worker whispered a name under his breath and then stepped away so fast he almost fell. Vampirian. The word moved through the crowd like poison. Daniel had heard the stories, like everyone else. Night hunters, blood drinkers, royal predators, world killers. Children on frontier stations were told to behave, or the Vampirians would come from the dark between suns. But the person in the crate did not look like a monster. She looked terrified. Her gaze moved across the crowd, and every face full of fear made her shrink farther back. When Daniel took one slow step closer, she flinched hard and raised her chained hands to protect herself. Then, in a weak, shaking voice, she said, "Please do not let them take me back." Daniel felt something twist inside him. The crowd started talking all at once. Call security. Seal the hallway. Burn the crate. Tell command. Someone already ran for the alarm switch. The girl heard that, and panic filled her face. She tried to move deeper into the crate, though there was nowhere left to go. Daniel lifted one hand toward the others. Stop. For some reason, they listened, maybe because he sounded more sure than he felt. He looked at the girl again. There were bruises on her arms, marks around her throat, old burns near one wing joint. No pet had injuries like that. No tamed companion shook like that. He lowered his voice. "What is your name?" She hesitated, as if giving her name could kill her. Finally, she whispered, "Lyra." The sound was soft and strange, but not inhuman, just scared. Daniel looked at the broken chain inside the crate, and then at the note in his hand. Tamed and conditioned. His jaw tightened. Someone had packed a living person into a box and sent her across the stars. Like property station security arrived moments later with shock rifles and bright armor plates. Their leader took one look inside the crate and cursed. The hallway emptied as workers backed away. The security chief ordered everyone to remain calm and asked for Daniel to step aside. Before he could move, the station lights flashed red. An incoming transmission override filled the corridor screens. 3 warships had just arrived beyond dock range. Their signal carried Drakari military codes. The face that appeared was scaled dark gold, with narrow eyes and polished command armor. The Drakari captain spoke without greeting. "This station is harboring stolen Dominion property. Return the Vampirian female immediately, and no harm will come to your personnel." Lyra made a small sound like she had stopped breathing. The security team raised weapons toward the crate. Daniel looked from their guns to the girl inside property. That was the second time someone had used a word for objects instead of lives. He hated it. Already, the Drakari captain continued. "The subject is dangerous, deceptive, and highly valuable. She is not to be spoken with. She is not to be released from restraint. Deliver her within 15 minutes. The transmission ended. The corridor became quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet, now the kind that comes before something breaks. Security Chief Morin turned to Daniel. "Move away from the crate." Daniel did not move. Lyra looked up at him with fear so raw, it barely seemed real. She was waiting for the choice, not from security, not from command from him, because he had opened the box, because he had seen her first. Because sometimes the first person who looks at a prisoner like a person becomes the only hope they have. Left. Morin stepped closer. "That thing is not your problem anymore." Daniel looked at the bruises on Lyra's wrists, then at the hallway full of armed people, then at the crate label calling her a pet, and something inside him settled into place. He did not know what the truth was yet. He did not know why the Drakari wanted her. He did not know if the old stories about her kind were lies or not. But he knew this, whatever monster the galaxy had told him to expect. It was not the shaking girl in the box. He stepped between Lyra and the guns, and for the first time that day, Daniel Carter said something that changed everything. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Security Chief Morin stared at Daniel as if he had lost his mind. 2 guards lifted their rifles higher, and the red aim lights touched his chest. Lyra shrank back inside the crate, but her eyes did not leave Daniel. She looked confused more than anything else, as if she had forgotten that anyone could stand in front of danger instead of stepping away from it. Morin spoke first. "You are obstructing station security during a military claim." Daniel kept his body in front of the crate. "She is injured. She is Drakari property," Morin said coldly. "And the Dominion has legal codes across half this sector." Daniel held up the note he had found inside. "This says she is a pet, not property, and definitely not a military asset." "So somebody is already lying," one of the guards muttered, that he should stop talking before command got involved. But command was already involved. A station-wide order came through the hall speakers. "All personnel stand clear of Cargo Corridor 7 Security Lockdown Level 2. In effect, civilian movement restricted until further notice." Morin cursed under his breath, then signaled his team to hold position. He did not want a firefight in a residential hall with half the station watching through their door. Cams. Daniel used that pause. He turned slightly and looked back into the crate. Lyra was breathing hard. There were dark lines under her eyes, and her lips were dry. One wing was bent the wrong way near the lower edge. She looked less like a nightmare creature and more like someone who had survived one. He spoke gently. "Can you stand?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Once." Daniel reached out slowly. Every guard tensed. Lyra stared at his hand as if it were some strange, impossible object. Then very carefully she placed her fingers in his. They were ice cold. When he helped her step out of the crate, the hallway pulled back another step. People expected some hidden monster shape or sudden attack. Instead, they saw a young woman who could barely keep her balance. The broken chain dragged behind one ankle and made a thin metal sound against the floor. Daniel hated that sound immediately. Morin touched his earpiece, then looked up with fresh orders in his eyes. "Command wants the subject moved to quarantine, holding until the Drakari boarding team arrives." Lyra made a soft, frightened noise. Her grip on Daniel's hand tightened. He did not let go. "She needs a medic first, not your call." Morin stepped forward. Daniel did something reckless then, and later he would wonder if that was the most human thing he had ever done. He said, "Then tell command if they want her moved, they can explain why she was shipped in chains like cargo and why military warships are calling her stolen property after a civilian pet company dropped her at my door." The guards looked at each other. Morin looked angry because the question mattered and everyone knew it before he could answer. Lyra swayed where she stood. Daniel caught her before she fell. She was lighter than he expected. far too light, like someone who had not eaten properly in a long time. Even Morin noticed after a hard silence. He ordered one guard to fetch medic support. Daniel led Lyra into his room before anyone could argue further. Morin objected, but not enough to physically stop him, because half the station cameras were now watching, and no one wanted to be remembered as the person who dragged a half-dead girl down a hall in chains. Inside the room, the light was dim and warm from the old engine heater. Daniel kept under the wall vent. The tiny space was crowded with tool cases, reactor manuals, and spare machine parts. Lyra looked around as if she had entered another world. Daniel cleared space on the edge of his bunk and helped her sit. He found a blanket and placed it over her shoulders. For a moment, she only held it and stared. Then, very quietly, she said, "Why?" Daniel blinked. Why are you helping?" The question hit harder than he expected. "Because somebody should." She looked down at the blanket in her hands. That answer seemed to trouble her more than anything else. The medic arrived minutes later, under armed watch. He scanned Lyra from a careful distance and reported dehydration, blood loss, stress, trauma, malnutrition, and damage to the left-wing membrane. His voice became shaky when he read her species code, but to his credit, he still gave her nutrient fluid and a stabilizer shot. Daniel asked what she could eat. The medic looked uncomfortable. "That depends on which old stories are true." Lyra closed her eyes like she had heard that line too many times. Daniel found packaged fruit protein broth and water from his shelf and set them near her. She looked at the food for a long time before touching it, like she expected someone to punish her for eating. When she finally drank the water, her hands shook so badly half of it spilled. Daniel pretended not to notice and handed her the broth. Morin stayed outside the door while Command argued with Drakari officers in orbit. The waiting only made the room tighter. After a while, Daniel sat on the crate opposite the bunk and asked the question that had been burning in him since the moment the box opened. "Who are they?" Lyra held the bowl with both hands. "The Drakari Dominion. Why do they want you?" She was silent for so long he thought she might refuse. Then she whispered, "Because they are afraid of you, of what my kind used to be." Daniel leaned forward. "And what was that?" Her red eyes lifted to his guardian. He almost laughed because it was the last word he expected. But something in her face stopped him. She was not joking. She spoke slowly, using simple trade language, as if every word cost effort. "Long ago, Vampirians hunted things that came from dark space, creatures that fed on fear and living minds. After the war ended, other empires feared us more than the monsters. They turned stories into lies, and lies into law." Daniel listened without interrupting. "Many of us were killed," she said. "Many sold, many used for experiments. The Drakari learned that royal blood can survive things others cannot, heal faster, carry old weapons, open ancient gates." Daniel frowned. "Royal blood?" Lyra lowered her eyes. "I should not be alive." Before he could ask more, a sharp tone came from the station hall speakers warning unauthorized Drakari shuttle has entered docking corridor 3. Security teams respond immediately. Morin cursed outside the door. Through the small room wall, Daniel heard boots running and alarms rising across the station. Lyra went pale in a way he did not think possible. "They are early," she whispered. Daniel stood. "How many?" She looked at the floor. "Enough, then." She said something that changed the fear in the room into something else. "If they take me back, they will not stop with me." Daniel felt a chill. "What do you mean? They know I was sent here." "They know you opened the crate." Her voice broke slightly. "The Drakari do not leave witnesses when they are hiding illegal transport there." It was the truth he had been circling from the start. This was never about law. This was cleanup. Morin pounded once on the door and shouted that Drakari soldiers were inside the station and Command was losing control of the lower dock. Daniel looked at Lyra, at the bent wing, at the chain on her ankle, at the terror she tried and failed to hide. Then he turned and locked the room door. Morin yelled in disbelief from the hallway. Daniel ignored him. He looked back at Lyra and spoke as calmly as he could. "Then we do not let them find you first." For the first time since he opened the crate, her expression changed, not into hope. Hope was probably too big for this moment, but into the smallest spark of belief. And outside his little room on Orion Outpost 7, the hunt began. The station had never sounded like that before. Sirens cried through the metal halls while blast doors slammed shut. Section by section, workers ran for shelter, and cargo bots froze where they stood as emergency codes seized the network. Through the small vent above Daniel's door came the distant echo of boots, gunfire, and shouted orders in 2 different languages. The Drakari were not waiting for permission anymore. They were coming. Daniel moved fast. He knelt beside Lyra and used a cutting tool from his work case to break the remaining chain around her ankle. Sparks flashed in the dim room. Each sharp crack made her flinch. Sorry, he muttered. When the last ring fell open, she rubbed her skin where the metal had bitten deep. He handed her a gray station jacket and she pulled it on over her torn clothing. The sleeves were too long and the fabric swallowed her frame. But it hid the worst of the bruises and folded over part of her wings. That was enough. Morin was still outside, shouting through the locked door. Carter, listen to me. Command has ordered you to stand down. Praemnind piled back without looking up. I know exactly how big it is. He opened the floor locker beside his bunk and pulled out a portable route pad. Engineering maps flashed across the screen. Old service tunnels ran under reactor level and reached half the station if a person knew where to crawl. Most people did not. Daniel did. He had repaired coolant lines in those tunnels for 4 years. He pointed to the map. There is a maintenance shaft behind the heat exchanger room. Nobody checks it because it stinks and the ladder is cracked. We can reach lower engineering from there. Lyra studied the map with surprising focus. Her fear was still there, but something sharper now stood beside it. Training, maybe, or instinct if they scanned biologics. She said softly, they will find B in open corridors. Daniel nodded. Then we do not use open corridors. A hard thud struck the room door from outside. Morin again, or maybe someone less patient. This time, Daniel slipped the route pad into his belt and crossed to the back wall. He removed a vent panel with 2 fast turns of his tool. Behind it was darkness and hot moving air. Lyra stood slowly. The medic shot had helped, but she still moved with pain under every breath. Can you climb? He asked. She gave one short nod. Another thud hit the door harder. Daniel boosted her into the vent. First her wings scraped metal and she bit down a sound of pain. Then he climbed in after her and pulled the panel mostly closed behind him. 1 second later, the room door crashed open. Footsteps stormed inside. Voices shouted too late. The vent tunnel was narrow and choked with dust. Hot air pressed against them from the engine ducts, and every few meters old metal groaned under their weight. Daniel crawled first, using memory to guide him through turns and junctions. Behind him, Lyra moved almost soundlessly. That unnerved him a little, not because it felt threatening, because it reminded him that beneath the fear and weakness, she belonged to a species built for surviving dark places. They stopped once when Drakari troops crossed the hall below. Through the grate, Daniel saw tall armored figures with narrow helmets and pulse carbines sweeping door to door. Their scales reflected blue alarm light, and their movements were cold and efficient cleanup. Indeed, they were not here to recover property. They were here to erase a problem. One of them paused beneath the vent and raised a scanner. Daniel held his breath. Lyra's hand touched his arm. Once stay still. The thought was simple and clear in his head. He nearly jerked from surprise, then realized she had not spoken aloud. Her eyes widened just as much as his sorry. She mouthed soundlessly. The scanner beeped and moved on. Only when the soldiers left did Daniel breathe again. You can do that, he whispered. Not well, she whispered back. Not when weak. They kept moving. After 10 painful minutes, they reached the heat exchanger room and dropped from the vent onto a grated platform above roaring pipes. Steam rolled through the chamber in white clouds. The noise covered them. Well, Daniel led Lyra toward a side ladder, but halfway there the main door below burst open. 3 Drakari soldiers entered with weapons ready. One glanced at a handheld reader, then pointed upward, motion trace. Daniel did not stop to think. He grabbed Lyra's wrist and ran across the catwalk. Bolts of blue plasma cracked past them and hit the rail behind his back. Metal screamed and sparks burst into the steam. Lyra moved faster than he expected, even half-starved and injured. They reached the ladder and slid down the far side as another shot blew part of the walkway apart. The chamber filled with falling metal. Daniel hit the floor, hard rolled and came up coughing. Lyra landed beside him with impossible grace. For someone so hurt, go, she said. They ran into a service corridor below engineering, where old pipes lined the walls and orange emergency lights painted everything like fire. A station worker stared at them from a junction, then fled without a word. Smart move. At the next turn, Daniel keyed open a maintenance hatch and pulled Lyra inside just as the Drakari reached the corridor behind them. They crouched in darkness while boots thundered past. Daniel's heart slammed so hard he could hear it. Lyra's head tilted slightly. They are tracking heat and blood that is specific. He muttered. I was hunted, before she said. The way she said it made him not ask by whom. They waited until the footsteps faded, then moved deeper into lower engineering. This section of the station was older and mostly abandoned. Except for emergency generators and storage tanks, no one liked to inspect. Good place to hide. Bad place to get trapped. Daniel stopped in a control nook and sealed the outer hatch. Then he finally turned to Lyra. You said royal blood can open ancient gates. She looked tired suddenly. Why ask that now? Because military ships do not storm stations for rumors, and because they lied about everything except one thing. He met her eyes. You are valuable. She stared at him for a long moment, then looked away. I am not valuable, she said quietly. I am dangerous to what they built. What did they build? A story, she answered, one where my people are monsters and theirs are protectors. Before Daniel could respond, the control room screens flickered alive. Someone had overridden local systems. The face of the Drakari captain filled every display. He seemed calmer now, which made him more dangerous human civilian. This is your final warning. The Vampirian female has killed thousands of my people. Surrender her and your station will be spared. Daniel looked at Lyra. Pain flashed over her face. But something else followed. Anger small but real. That is a lie, she said. The captain continued. If you choose to shield her, you become an enemy of the Dominion. The transmission cut. Daniel stared at the dark screen. Enemy of the Dominion was not a phrase a mechanic wanted attached to his name. But the more he learned, the less choice there seemed to be. He looked at Lyra again. Did you kill anyone? Her answer came without delay. Only those who held the knives. Daniel nodded once. Good enough. She stared at him as if she had never heard anyone accept an answer. Like that? Then far away, somewhere above them, the station shook, not from internal fighting. From impacts, the Drakari ships had started hitting the outer hull. They were done pretending. Daniel checked the map pad again and saw one route left open to core engineering, where the humans still controlled defense systems. If they could reach it, they might lock the Drakari out of half the station. If they failed, there would be nowhere left to run. He offered Lyra his hand again. Come on. She looked at his hand and at his face. Why do humans do this? She asked. Do what? Pick a side before they know the whole story. Daniel gave a tight, tired smile. Because sometimes the whole story can wait, but chains cannot. For the first time, she almost smiled back then. Together, they stepped into the failing lights and went toward the heart of the station where the real fight was waiting. Core engineering looked like the center of a dying machine. Warning lights flashed over massive reactor columns and steam hissed from ruptured valves near the upper gantries. Humans in work suits and half-armor rushed between control panels carrying power cells, tools, and old station rifles taken from emergency lockers. They were mechanics loaders, welders, and maintenance hands, not soldiers, but fear had made them sharp. Daniel and Lyra came through a side hatch, and every weapon in the room lifted at once. Then several voices recognized him. Carter, he is alive. Close that hatch. The humans pulled them inside and sealed the door with manual bars. Chief Engineer Mara Sato marched over with grease on one cheek and a plasma cutter hanging at her hip. She looked first at Daniel, then at Lyra, then at the blood on his sleeve where a metal shard had cut him during the chase. You brought the problem into my reactor room, she said. Daniel nodded. Yes. Mara glanced at Lyra again. Is she the problem? Daniel thought about that for 1 second. No. Mara accepted the answer with a short breath, as if she had expected nothing else from him. Good. Then we have a different problem. She pointed to the main tactical display. 3 Drakari boarding groups held Lower Dock Cargo Ring and Habitat 6. Their ships were staying just outside direct station gun range and using shielded shuttles to move troops inside command. Was trapped in upper control. Security had split into groups, some following orders, some simply trying to survive. The station was breaking apart by layers. Mara spoke fast. We still control reactor output, life support switching, and internal turrets for engineering sectors. If the Drakari take this room, they take the station. One of the techs looked nervously at Lyra. And if the Drakari are right about her? Lyra lowered her eyes before anyone else could answer. Daniel was about to speak, but Mara beat him to it. I have seen enough frightened people in chains to know which side I dislike more. That ended the question. For now, she handed Daniel a compact shock pistol and told him not to shoot himself with it. Then she turned to Lyra. Can you fight the room? Went very still. Lyra answered honestly, not for long. Good, Mara said, we only need long enough. She sent workers to reinforce doors and reroute power, while Daniel finally got 30 seconds to breathe. He sat on an overturned supply crate near the reactor monitor and cleaned the blood from his arm. Lyra stood beside a coolant pipe in the flickering light like she was unsure she was allowed to stay. He offered her the medical patch. She came closer and took it. Her hands were steadier now. A little color had returned to her face, and the darkness under her eyes had eased, still weak but not broken. What happens if they catch you? He asked quietly. She pressed the patch to his cut before answering. I go back in a box, and after that, their scientists will keep trying until my blood opens. What they want. Opened, he watched her expression. What is it? An old vault, she said. Older than the Dominion. Older than human flight. Older than most current empires. My family guarded the roots to it. Why? Because what sleeps there should not wake. Simple words. Heavy meaning. Daniel leaned back against the crate and exhaled slowly. So this is not just about one girl in a box. She gave him a tired look. Was it ever? Before he could answer, the station speakers crackled again. This time, it was not the Drakari captain. It was Station Commander Helen Vos, and her voice was hard with pressure. All remaining personnel. This is Commander Vos. By authority of Frontier Charter, I am ordering temporary compliance with Dominion retrieval demands to preserve civilian lives. Anyone sheltering the Vampirian subject must surrender immediately. The room froze. One of the younger techs cursed. Another just stared at the speaker as if the sound had punched him. Mara's face turned to stone. Temporary compliance, she repeated. That is a polished way to say hand over the prisoner. Lyra stepped back from the group as if making the choice easier for them. Daniel saw it happen and hated it. She was preparing to leave, not because she trusted the Drakari, because she did not want humans dying for her. There it was again, that same reflex prisoners develop when they have been taught their own existence is too expensive. Mara noticed, too. Her eyes went to Daniel. Well, she said, you open the box. What? Now all around him, ordinary humans waited, not for orders. Exactly. For a line to stand on. Daniel looked at the reactor glow on the walls, at the patched clothes and tired faces, at Lyra trying very hard to become smaller than she was. Then he remembered the note inside the crate, tamed in conditions safe for domestic handling. Rage rose in him so clean it felt almost calm. He stood. If Command wants to hand her over, then Command can come down here and do it themselves. A few nervous laughs broke out, because fear always loves a little rebellion. Mara nodded once, as if she had just received the answer she wanted. Good, she said then. Engineering is in open disobedience. No one objected. That surprised even Daniel. But maybe it should not have. Frontier humans were stubborn by survival. Most of them had once been poor, desperate, or unwanted by bigger worlds. They understood bad deals when they saw them. And a woman shipped in chains while warships demanded her return was the worst deal of all. Mara began assigning positions, turrets on sectors 2 and 4, coolant vent traps primed near the East Hall manual, barricade at the lift. She pointed at Daniel and Lyra. With me. They climbed a side stair to an upper control platform overlooking the main entrance corridor. From there they could see the long reinforced door that led into engineering proper. Mara checked a monitor and swore softly. They are stacking charges outside. Daniel gripped the shock pistol. How long? Seconds, not minutes. Lyra stood, very still, then said, there will be a heavy unit, first shield, front line after that. They believe humans break when they see armor advance. Mara glanced at her and Dewey. Daniel answered for both of them sometimes, but we also throw things. Mara almost smiled. The explosion came before the smile finished. The main door buckled inward in a bloom of white heat and smoke. Alarms screamed. The barricade below held for 3 seconds, then shattered under a second blast. Drakari troops poured through in dark armor and layered shields, moving fast and disciplined. Engineering turrets opened fire from ceiling mounts, and 2 invaders dropped at once, but the rest spread out with perfect precision. Return the subject, and you may yet live. A voice boomed from a speaker on their side. Mara muttered a rude answer and hit the coolant relay. Superheated vapor roared from side pipes and filled half the corridor in a blinding cloud. Human workers fired from catwalks and maintenance wells. Metal tools became weapons. Industrial drones became attack swarms. Welding arcs became traps. The Drakari had come prepared for guards. They had not come prepared for angry engineers. Still, they kept pushing. More troops entered. One heavy unit with a tower shield smashed through the lower barricade and sent 2 humans flying. Daniel fired his pistol and learned instantly why Mara told him not to shoot himself with it. The recoil jolted his whole arm numb, but the bolt struck a Drakari shoulder and dropped the soldier hard enough to matter. Below them, the fight turned ugly. A human loader named Ibrahim swung a pipe wrench into an armored helmet and went down under return. Fire Mara cursed and moved to another console. Then, the heavy unit looked up toward the platform and raised an ion launcher. Lyra moved before anyone else saw it. She shoved Daniel and Mara flat just as the shot blasted through the railing behind them. Nettle rained across the platform. Lyra staggered from the effort, and her eyes flashed red so bright the room seemed darker around them. The Drakari below noticed a murmur went through their line. Not fear yet. Recognition. Wrong, Princess, one of them hissed. Lyra heard it. So did Daniel. Princess. For one moment, the battle seemed to pause around that word. Then Lyra straightened, despite the pain, despite the weakness, despite every bruise the box had given her. And when she spoke, her voice carried farther than it should have. You chained the last daughter of House Sarakai and sent me as livestock. The red in her eyes deepened. Now you will answer for the insult. The Drakari line hesitated only for a heartbeat. But sometimes one heartbeat is all humans need. Mara slammed both hands on the emergency defense switch, and engineering went to war. The reactor room changed. In an instant, heavy blast shutters dropped over side entries and sealed 3 approach lanes. Floor panels opened beneath the Drakari front line, and maintenance arms shot upward like steel jaws. One invader disappeared into a service pit while another was pinned against a wall by a cargo manipulator designed to lift engines. Not soldiers' lights died everywhere, except emergency red. The world became shadow and alarm and sparks. Humans shouted across catwalks, using nicknames and half-formed plans that only made sense because they had spent years working beside each other in dangerous places. Cut power line, be open vent. 7 drone pack, left side. Watch the upper rail. Daniel had no idea when ordinary workers had become a fighting force, but there they were doing it anyway. Below the platform, Mara fired a tool launcher into a Drakari shield seam and grinned when the blast cracked it open. To her right, 2 maintenance bots with welding torches swarmed a fallen soldier and forced the rest of the line to retreat. 3 steps. Lyra stood at the edge of the platform, breathing hard. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. Now from effort. The air round her seemed colder. Daniel moved next to her. You said not for long. She kept her eyes on the battle. I said I could fight. Then without warning, she jumped for one impossible second. She seemed to fall straight into the middle of the Drakari formation. Then her wings opened, not fully damaged, as one side was but enough. Shadows spread behind her like torn silk, and she landed among the invaders with terrible grace. The nearest Drakari fired point blank. Lyra twisted aside faster than Daniel's eyes could follow, and drove the soldier into the wall with one hand. Not human strength, not even close. Another lunged with an energy blade, and she caught his wrist, snapped the angle of the strike, and sent the blade through the armor of the man behind him. The room froze around the sight. All those stories, all those old nightmares, suddenly had shape. But Daniel only saw one truth. She had never attacked anyone who was not trying to cage or kill her that mattered. 3 Drakari moved on her together with synchronized force pulls. Lyra met them head-on for a moment. Red light flickered through the darkness, as if her eyes were the only stars left in the room. She disarmed one, broke the weapon of another, and hurled the third across a coolant line. Then the effort hit her. She stumbled, the heavy unit saw it, and charged with shield. Raised Daniel did not think. He leaped down 2 ladder rungs, swung across a service rail, and fired the shock pistol directly into the open side of the armored giant. The bolt did not stop it, but it turned the head just enough. Lyra moved at once. She struck the weak point under the arm, and the heavy unit crashed to the floor like a falling machine tower. For one breath, they stood side by side in the center of the fight. The terrified girl from the crate and the mechanic who opened it somewhere above them. A human tech shouted like it was a game won at the last second. The sound spread, not laughter exactly, something harder belief. The Drakari line felt it too. Their perfect advance began to break. He came through the blasted main door with 6 elite guards in armor, brighter than the rest, dark gold-edged in black command marks. He carried no rifle, only a long pulse spear that hummed with contained power. His gaze found Lyra immediately. "Princess Sarakai," he said, as if the room were calm and civilized. "You have caused enough disorder." Lyra straightened, though her shoulders shook. "You sold children of my house to laboratories." The captain gave a small, careless tilt of his head, a regrettable necessity. Daniel had heard enough. He raised the pistol, but the captain moved faster than anything that size should move. The spear flicked once and the weapon flew from Daniel, hand in pieces. The guards leveled carbines. Mara and the others aimed back from the catwalks. Nobody fired. Not yet. The captain addressed the humans without taking his eyes from Lyra. "This station can still survive. Surrender her and the Dominion will classify your interference as misguided civilian panic." Mara spat over the railing. "Classified this," she said, and cut the overhead winch line. A suspended engine casing dropped from the crane track toward the captain. Group 2 elite guards shoved him clear, but the casing crushed one soldier and broke the formation. Gunfire exploded again from every side. The pause was over. Daniel dove for cover as plasma bolts burned across the floor. Lyra launched straight at the captain. Their collision sounded like metal slamming into metal, though she wore no armor at all. The spear spun in bright arcs, forcing her back step by step. He was skilled, far more skilled than his troops, and he knew her style. Each time she tried to close, he met her with perfect distance and brutal precision. Old training. Daniel realized he had studied Vampirians, or fought them, before, maybe both. Below the catwalk, Ibrahim, who had gone down earlier, dragged himself behind a console and manually released the emergency drone rack. Dozens of repair drones burst into the air and filled the room like angry insects, flashing cutter sparks in all directions. The Drakari fired upward to clear them. Humans used the chaos to reposition. Mara screamed at Daniel to get the internal turrets online from the lower node. He ran through smoke and heat toward the console bank near the west wall. A Drakari trooper met him halfway. Daniel barely blocked the strike with a loose panel arm, and the impact numbed both shoulders. He was not a soldier and knew it, so he fought like an engineer. He slammed the panel arm into a valve wheel, turned it hard, and vented a blast of freezing coolant straight into the trooper faceplate. The soldier went down screaming. Daniel reached the node and rammed power back into sectors 1 and 3. Ceiling turrets woke with a mechanical scream and tore into the Drakari rear line. The battle tipped, not cleanly, not safely, but enough. Still, the captain kept pressing. Lyra finally, his spear struck her. "Injured wing," she cried out and dropped to one knee. The whole room seemed to tighten around that sound. The captain leveled the spear point at her throat. "Look around you," he said. "Humans die because you were too weak to remain in your crate." Something changed in Daniel. Then all the fear, all the confusion, all the caution burned away and left only fury. He crossed the distance before common sense could stop him. A human mechanic with bleeding hands and no proper weapon should never have challenged a Dominion captain. That was probably why it worked. Daniel drove a magnetic clamp straight into the captain's chest plate and triggered full industrial lock. The clamp was designed to hold engine blocks steady during jump calibration. It grabbed armor with a violent crack and dragged the captain sideways into a support beam. The spear flew loose. Lyra caught it before it hit the floor. The room went silent in pieces one by one. Humans stopped firing. Drakari stopped advancing. Everyone watched. Lyra rose slowly with the spear in her hand. Her face was pale again, but her eyes burned brighter than before. The captain struggled against the clamp and could not move. She stepped to him. "You called me weak," she said. Then she drove the spear through the beam beside his head. So hard the metal split. "I am the last mercy you will receive." The remaining Drakari broke first. Some tried to retreat. Some dropped weapons. Some ran for the breach door. Humans did not chase far because they did not need to. Engineering belonged to them. Again, breathing hard, Daniel looked around at smoke sparks, wrecked armor, and exhausted workers. They had done it, at least for now. Lyra let the spear fall and turned toward him. For 1 second, he thought she might collapse. Instead, she reached for his arm just to stay standing. The human mechanic and the alien vampire princess stood in the middle of a reactor room full of stunned survivors, and everyone there understood the same thing at once. The Drakari had not made their biggest mistake by attacking the station. They had made it the moment they delivered a hunted girl to a human and expected him not to care. Victory did not feel clean. It felt loud, hot, and unfinished. Smoke drifted under the reactor ceiling while medics moved between wounded humans and captured Drakari alike because frontier stations did not have the luxury of sorting pain by species when people were bleeding on the same floor. Mara leaned against a broken console with a bandage around her head and cursed every time someone told her to sit down. Ibrahim was alive, though angry at being told he needed rest. Half the engineering crew wore burns, cuts, or cracked bones, but they were standing. That mattered. Daniel sat on the lowest stair of the platform while a medic sealed the cut on his arm properly this time. His hands would not stop shaking now that the fighting had slowed. Shock arrived late, and many humans, the medic said, that was normal, and gave him water that tasted like metal. Across the room, Lyra stood near a coolant pillar, while two station doctors argued quietly over what treatment would work on a Vampirian royal. She looked exhausted beyond words. Her hair clung damp against her face, and her damaged wing hung low under the oversized station jacket, but she was standing too. That mattered even more. Then Commander Vos finally arrived with a mixed group of security officers and looked around the wrecked engineering bay in stunned silence. Broken armor, captured elite troops, dead drones, angry civilians holding tools like weapons. Her gaze settled on Lyra, and then on Daniel. You disobeyed a direct order. She said. Mara answered before he could, and saved your station. Vos did not deny. Reports came fast after that. The Drakari had lost control of 3 boarding lanes once engineering reactivated internal defense grids. Their shuttle corridor was under human turret fire, and one of their warships had backed off after station guns found an angle on its shield edge. The Dominion still had superior force outside, but the fast, clean recovery they wanted was gone. Now it was a public incident. Worse for them, civilians had recorded everything. The crate that chains the demands the attack. Truth traveled quickly when fear failed to stop it. Captain Varok, the Drakari commander, was held in a magnetic restraint field in Storage Bay 2. He remained silent except for one request to speak with Lyra. Alone, she refused. Smart choice, Mara said when she heard very smart choice. An hour later, long-range traffic channels began to light up. Merchant ships passing through sector had received fragments of the station emergency broadcasts. Frontier relays copied them outward. Independent journalists asked why a Dominion task force had stormed a civilian station over a crate labeled luxury pet delivery. Smugglers, miners, patrol crews, and trade guild clerks all started repeating the same ugly question. What exactly was the Dominion trying to hide? Commander Vos looked 10 years older by the time she gathered the station council in the battered command annex above engineering. Daniel was there because somehow all disasters now seemed to lead back to him. Mara sat beside him, still refusing full medical leave. Lyra stood near the rear wall, wrapped in a clean blanket someone had finally found for her. When the council asked for a statement, she did not speak like a frightened prisoner anymore. Her voice was soft but steady. My name is Lyra Sarakai, daughter of House Sarakai, last recognized heir of the Outer Night Accords. I was taken during a Dominion purge of surviving Vampirian enclaves. Others were not as fortunate as I was. Every person in the room listened, not because of some strange power, because truth spoken without drama can be heavier than any speech she told them about transport vaults, blood research, royal gene mapping, children separated from elders, old relic routes. The Dominion wanted opened. She did not exaggerate. She did not need to. By the time she finished, even Commander Vos looked sick. One council member asked the question everyone had carried since the box opened. Are your people truly what the galaxy says? Lyra was silent for a moment. Then she answered with painful honesty. Once we were dangerous. We were made to fight things. Others could not survive, but danger is not evil, and fear is not truth. Nobody in the room argued not. After what they had seen, the meeting ended with a decision that would have sounded insane that morning. Orion Outpost 7 granted Lyra formal asylum under frontier protection. It also transmitted evidence packets of Drakari actions to every neutral authority within range. The Dominion answered with threats within minutes. They demanded immediate reversal and the release of Captain Varro. Commander Vos replied with a public message that was short by her standards. You attack civilians and trafficked a sentient being in chains. We will not assist your cleanup. The sector loved that message. By the next cycle, it had spread farther than the first emergency footage. Daniel found Lyra later on. An observation deck above the damaged dock ring stars burned quietly beyond the glass. Repair lights moved outside like tiny fireflies over broken hull plates. She stood with one hand against the window, as if still getting used to being able to stand anywhere without permission. He walked up beside her. "How bad is it?" he asked. "For the station? Or for the galaxy?" she replied. Both. She looked out into the dark. "For the station. Hard weeks and expensive repairs. For the galaxy, harder questions." Daniel nodded. "Fair." After a moment, she added, "The Dominion will come again, probably with more ships." "Almost certainly." He looked at her sideways. "That worries you less than I expected." "It worries me very much," she said, then turned to him. "But not in the same way as before." "What, before I knew what humans do when they choose a side?" He laughed once, tired and short. "We are not always smart about it." "No," she said softly. "You are not." There was almost a smile in her face now. Almost down in the docking ring, workers painted over scorch marks, while security teams reinforced every entrance. Nobody acted like life would return to normal soon. But something else had arrived in its place. Purpose, maybe, or stubborn pride, or the simple frontier refusal to bow. After being kicked, news continued to spread over the next days. Independent systems began requesting hearings. Old sealed records about Vampirian wars were challenged. Survivors from hidden enclaves sent coded messages toward Orion Outpost 7, testing whether the rumors of sanctuary were true. Some messages only said one thing: "Is the princess alive?" Each time Lyra read them, her hands shook for a very different reason than before. Not fear, now hope. Captain Varrock was transferred under heavy guard to a neutral court vessel after 3 more powers entered the dispute and made open Dominion retaliation too dangerous for the moment. As he was escorted out, he looked once at Daniel through the containment field. "You have no idea what you awakened." Human Daniel thought of the crate, the chains, the lies, the reactor room, the workers who chose to fight. Then he answered simply. Good. Varrock had no reply to that. Weeks later, when the first Allied convoy arrived to help protect the station, it carried food, medicine, defense parts, and something else. Families, not human families. Vampirian survivors hidden for years in scattered systems, who had heard the impossible story: a princess sent as a pet, a human who opened the box, a station that refused to give her back. They stepped off the ship slowly, with caution in every movement, until Lyra walked forward to meet them. Then the caution broke. Some cried, some fell to their knees, some just stared at her like dawn after a very long night. Daniel watched from the hangar rail beside Mara. "Well, Mara said, seems you adopted more than one stray." Daniel smiled. "Was not my plan." "Never is," she said. Lyra turned in the crowd and found him with her eyes. For a moment, all the noise of the hangar faded. He remembered the first time he saw those eyes, in the dark of the crate, full of fear and pain, and no reason to trust anyone now. They held something new. Strength returned. Grief still there, purpose burning behind it. And trust, not blind trust, earned trust, the rare kind. The kind that can change history. Later stories across the sector would tell the event in many ways. Some said the Dominion lost a princess. Some said frontier humans started a political storm. Some said an ancient people found their voice again. But the most popular version was the simplest: they promised a human a pet, but the box held a terrified alien vampire instead. And that was the day the galaxy learned a lesson it should have known already. Never place a frightened soul in front of a human and expect the human to stay out of it.